Good Sunday morning, my friends. Hello, Zoom Church. We have probably about, 50 household screens joining us in this live stream. My name is Jen Youngsun Ryu. I use pronouns she and her. I'm a shorter, older person with long graying hair pulled back, and I am just one of your ministers. You met Eli Poor, our new assistant minister, when I first announced their hire this spring. And now they are actually here. Eli is a minister in formation, meaning they're not quite ordained yet. They manage the religious exploration programs for our youth and our spiritual deepening programs for everyone. Eli is also a preacher and a pastor, so please come to either one of us for anything. And now, feel the ground solid beneath you. Feel the expanse of sky above. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, send goodwill and love to all. The flaming chalice is a symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith. People from the beginning of time gathered around fires for light, for safety, for storytelling. Whenever we gather around the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, there is love. Let us say together the words of our mission, which speak of our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world.
Good morning to you all. I'm so glad to see your faces this morning. Welcome to those of us here on the UUCE campus and those of us joining online. We're so glad that you're here. I'm Eli Poor. I use they or he pronouns. I'm about middle height with short, kind of messy this morning, dark blonde, light brown hair, a little bit of facial scruff, and brown patterned glasses. I'm pleased to join you as part of your worship team this Sunday. It's been a long wait, and I've been so excited, and I'm so glad that we're finally here together. We gather this morning from many places. Some of us have been a part of this community for decades. Some of us are still learning how things work here. Some may be wondering, even now, whether there is a place for them. We arrive with different stories, different histories, different bodies and minds, different ways of experiencing and understanding the world. And we arrive in a world where questions of welcome and belonging are not abstract ones. Across our communities, immigrant families are living with uncertainty and fear. People are navigating detention, deportation, separation, and the possibility that the places that they have made home may not recognize them as belonging there. In moments like this, religious community has something important to ask. Not simply who are we willing to welcome, but what does it mean to belong to one another? Because welcome and belonging are not quite the same thing. Welcome says there's a place for you here. Belonging asks what happens when we're together. It asks whether our stories matter, whether we can participate as our whole selves, whether our presence is allowed to change the community, whether we are allowed to be changed in turn, whether we are willing to receive from one another as readily as we give. And perhaps it asks us to notice the people we imagine as needing welcome are often creating communities of extraordinary care, sharing what they have, protecting one another, tending to one another, making home in places where home has been difficult to find. So today we reflect on immigration and belonging, but also on something larger. What does it mean to become neighbors? What do we owe one another? And what might we learn when we stop imagining that some of us are hosts and others are guests? Whatever your body or your mind needs this morning, whatever your story, wherever you find yourself on life's journey, may this be a place where we practice something deep. May belonging and community be our practices. May we listen with curiosity. May we make room for the many ways human beings participate, communicate, connect, and care. May we allow ourselves to be changed by one another. And may we discover together what it means to cultivate beloved community one day at a time, one person at a time, one relationship at a time. Come, let us worship together. And I brought a prop today. So I brought something with me today. It's my backpack. Anybody want to try and guess what's in here? Lip gloss? It's a great guess. Something, yeah, that definitely has something in it. Yeah. Well, this is the chopsticks. That's a great guess. Yeah. It probably had chopsticks at some point. Yeah, so this is the backpack I've been living out of while I've moved to Eugene. As you all know, I'm just getting here and just learning everybody and getting used to the space. And when you're living out of a backpack, you have to make some choices. You can't bring everything with you, can you? So what can you bring? What would you bring? Imagine that you were going somewhere new and you could only take what could fit in this backpack. What would absolutely have to come with you? 5 lip glosses. Yeah, that's very important. For sure. What else? What else? Yeah. A parachute. Okay. Important in case, you gotta make a quick exit from an airplane or tall building. Yeah, definitely. Safety first. Yes. Did you have your hand up? Oh, I'm sorry. Who else? Yeah.
You got to know where your towel is.
Your towel, very important. Yeah, your towel. What else? What else are we taking with us in our backpack? Our bed. Oh my goodness. Yeah, one more guess. Okay.
I got another guess.
Okay, what? Let's listen here first.
One thing that probably couldn't fit in that backpack that I know will always fit in my heart is hope.
Perfect. I love that. Yes, yes, yes. There are things that don't fit in the backpack. So one more. What did you have?
Your med pills, so just in case you get sick.
Absolutely. Your medication, that's very important to have. Definitely.
My mom run stuff for her service.
Yeah, you need your medication, definitely.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. So some of you are going to need much bigger backpacks for your bed and the parachute and things like that, and that's okay. And here's the thing, when we go somewhere new, we carry more than the things that we put in a bag, which you got right here. You said hope, right? So I came to Eugene carrying this, but I also came carrying things that you can't see, stories and songs I know, things that people have taught me, foods that I love, questions I don't know the answer to, and you couldn't fit all of that in there. But I brought it with me anyway, and every one of you did too. So think for a second about something that you carry that wouldn't fit in a backpack like hope. Maybe it's a song that your family sings or something someone that you love taught you a tradition, a story, a language, a recipe. You don't have to say it out loud, just think of one.
I do.
Okay, if you want to say it out loud, that's fine. What is that?
A tomato that's evil.
A tomato that's evil. Okay, yeah, definitely. We can bring that along with us. So when somebody comes into, sometimes when someone comes into a new community, I think we sometimes say, welcome, come be like us. Maybe we don't say it quite like that, that would be weird. But sometimes I think that's what we mean, whether we realize it or not. Here's how you do things, here's where you sit, here's how we sing, here's how you belong. And being shown how things work is really, really important.
Why?
I've needed a lot of that this week. Why? Because you got to know where the coffee is. You got to know where the bathroom is. You got to know those things are important, right? And you all have helped me with that this week a lot. Yeah. So that's belonging means you being here gets to change who we are. And that's true when somebody comes to a new church, it's true when somebody goes to a new school, it's true when you move into a new neighborhood, and it's true when people come to a new country too. People don't arrive empty-handed. And even when someone arrives carrying almost nothing they can put in a backpack, they still arrive carrying this whole other life, right? So maybe one of the best questions, and tomatoes, yeah. Sometimes, maybe one of the best questions we can ask when someone new arrives isn't always, how can we welcome you? Maybe we can also ask, what did you bring with you? And then be ready to listen to the answer. Because everybody, ourselves included, are carrying something we don't know much about yet. And sometimes, if we're curious enough to ask, what they're carrying becomes something that we get to share together. Thank you all for helping me with the story today. So as we sing the blessing song, there's a couple of options here. You can either walk under the bridge, or Teacher Mel will be waiting to the side here to take you around. Thank you all. Be open to learning, may your just be truth into the world. May your heart be love. Thank you, Augie. Thank you. As you go your way in peace, as you go.
Hi, I'm Augie Sabini, and I'm the worship associate today. No one is a stranger. Before there were borders, there were rivers. Before there were checkpoints, there were roads worn into the earth by people searching for water, for food, for safety, or for one another. Human beings have always moved. We have followed seasons and coastlines, fled wars, crossed mountains, left places we loved because staying inside had become impossible. And wherever we have gone, we have carried pieces of home with us, a language spoken softly to a child, a recipe remembered without measurements, a prayer learned from a grandmother, a song whose words still know the place we came from. Perhaps this is why belonging is more than hospitality. Hospitality says you may enter my space. Belonging says there is already space here that is yours. Belonging does not ask us to erase the roads behind us, to pronounce our names differently, to leave our stories at the door, or to prove that we deserve to stay. It asks something of those of us already inside, to widen the circle, to move over, to listen, to recognize that the person arriving with everything they could carry is not an interruption to the story. They are a part of the story, and perhaps none of us is as settled as we imagine. Every one of us lives on land that held stories before ours. Every one of us has depended upon the welcome of someone else. Every one of us knows something about being human to find a place where we can finally set down what we've been carrying. So may we become the people who open the doors, more than open them. May we become the people who make room. May our tables grow longer. May our understanding of our neighbors stretch beyond citizenship, beyond language, beyond birthplace, beyond every boundary we have been taught to defend. And when someone comes among us looking for safety, for community, for a place to breathe, may they find more than just welcome. May they find belonging. And may we remember, the earth beneath us has never called any of us a stranger.
Oh, I'm a little nervous this morning. Can I ask everybody, let's just take a breath together. Can we do that? Will you say with me, I belong here. I belong here. Thank you. Back in January, I joined a clergy call with faith leaders in Minneapolis. It was the middle of what's since been called Operation Metro Surge. It was federal immigration moving hard and enforced through the city all at once. Like most clergy calls, there was a practical agenda. People shared updates from their congregations. They talked about families afraid to leave their homes, about legal observers and childcare, about where people could safely gather, and about what churches and individuals could do. But what stayed with me all of these months later, this was back in January, it wasn't the logistics of the thing. It was what I learned there in real time about who had already built these pre-existing networks of care that were stunning to witness. None of what we were hearing about had started that week. So this was right after Renee Good was killed by ICE, and it was national news. And while we were there, Alex Preddy followed later that week. And those deaths mattered, they shocked, and that grief deserves to be spoken. And also, as that story broke, there had been people dying in enforcement operations and immigration detention whose names most of us would never know. And I think we have to be honest about what that says about whose grief we've been trained to register and whose we haven't. The communities that have been most infected by immigration enforcement generally haven't been the ones that were surrounded by news cameras. So in Minneapolis, interfaith clergy went out in these groups to be visible and present in these heavily patrolled areas. And my group watched ICE surround a pregnant woman on the sidewalk that fast. It took less than 10 seconds. Whistles sounded, car alarms went off from neighbors inside their homes, and she was eventually released, thank goodness. But the speed of it was stunning. It was stunning. I walked the international corridor with a group of interfaith clergy, block after block, past migrant-owned businesses with signs in the windows, closed due to security concerns, and English and Spanish and all sorts of languages, storefront after storefront, a whole street of livelihoods that had been shuttered. And the same week, I stood in the parking lot of a Spanish-speaking Catholic church where ICE agents idled at the edge of it, and neighbors and clergy volunteers from so many different traditions were packing groceries inside. Anyway, we kept loading cars, kept going door to door to families too afraid to leave their homes. Neighbors set off car alarms from inside their homes to let others know that ICE was in the area. Some of you may have seen those videos. And what struck me there wasn't simply that people had figured out how to respond, it was that this response was practiced, and you could feel that. You could feel it, who called whom, who already knew where the walk-in freezer was in a certain place, who knew which families needed groceries, delivered instead of picked up, and you don't get there without relationship and practice and plenty of it. So some of that muscle goes back to the uprising after George Floyd was killed right there in that city, and some of it goes back much further. People had been building this thing for years, and that muscle of caring was a beautiful thing to witness, and I think it's something that we can learn from. So I know something about what it is to become a number two. I was incarcerated once in a facility run by CCA, which is now Core Civic, along with Geo Group, is one of the largest for-profit detention centers in the country. And I'm not putting that beside what I watched and what I've witnessed and what's been happening to migrant families as though they are the same, because they aren't. But I do remember in my body what happens when a system stops seeing you as a person and starts processing you as a file, as a threat. Meals costed out, medical care costed out, my name mattered less than my number, and nobody had to break a single law to make me disappear a little. I think there's something important there for religious communities to notice. When we talk about immigration, especially in churches, we often talk about welcome. How do we welcome immigrants? How do we welcome refugees? How do we welcome the newcomer? And those are really good questions, but I've also been wondering what's hidden inside that word. Because welcome can imply a particular relationship. I'm already inside, you're outside. This is my home, my table, my country, and I'm the one deciding to open the door for you. And there can be real generosity in that, right? But there is also power. The person doing the welcoming still gets to decide where the doorway is and who has to knock. And I think belonging is stranger than that. Sometimes it begins before anybody opens a door at all. People find each other, they learn each other's names, they build networks of care underneath institutions and systems that often don't recognize them, and sometimes despite systems actively trying to tear them apart. And often the people with the least institutional security become the ones most fluent in that kind of belonging because they've had to be. Nobody was going to hold the door for them. So they built their own doorways, their own tables, their own ways of keeping one another alive. That woman that I watched surrounded on the sidewalk, I don't know her name, but I'd put money on this. Somebody in that neighborhood did. Somebody had her number in their phone. Somebody was already asking where she was. And I've been thinking about all of this week because, as you know, I just moved here. And moving to Eugene to begin a ministry is not crossing an international border. It's not seeking asylum or living with the fear that one encounter with immigration enforcement could tear your family apart. I don't want to borrow those experiences to make mine sound bigger than it is. But I do want to tell you honestly that standing here today has cost something. And I think you deserve to know something about the person standing in front of you, too. I've fought long and hard to be in this room. I've come through addiction, through incarceration, through stretches of not having anywhere to sleep. I've been, in more ways than one, on the outside, the kind of outside people build whole systems to keep people on. And most of what I've had to learn since wasn't how to leave those places behind. It was how to let them teach me something. And that's exciting. And it's also, if I'm honest, deeply uncomfortable. And I have all the usual fears, right? I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of standing in this pulpit for the first time and falling on my face in front of people I already want one weekend so badly to be worthy of. But I'm here anyway because I want us to look past who we've been taught, even in traditions as open as this one. Who gets to hold the answers? And I don't think it's the person in the pulpit or in the pews even. Sometimes it's the person, the pulpit, or the pews were never built to expect. So this week, many of you have shown me something about belonging. You've answered questions I didn't know I needed to ask. You've remembered my name on the second try and the third. You've made room. I'm really, really grateful for that. And I don't think what's happening between us is simply that you already had a community and decided to let me into it. Something new is starting here. A ministry is beginning. We're still figuring out who we're going to be to each other. What will this thing look like? I'll change this place the way anyone does when they truly arrive somewhere. And this place the people and all of you will change me. That's what belonging does. It isn't one person standing in a doorway while another asks permission to come in. It's that slower work of becoming responsible for one another, of allowing ourselves to be changed by people whose stories might be very different from our own. Maybe belonging isn't something one group possesses and hands off to another. Maybe it's something we build between us. And if that's true, then maybe the question isn't who are we willing to welcome, maybe it's what kind of neighbors are we willing to become. So I'm preparing for the groans here, and let it out. There's a moment, the moment someone in a pulpit says there's an old story in the Bible, there's something that happens inside of us. Some of us lean in, some of us pull back. There are the inevitable groans, right? And I understand all of that. I understand all of it. Christian scriptures have inspired extraordinary acts of compassion, liberation, resistance, and courage, and it's also been wielded to justify extraordinary cruelty. And many people, myself included, have been wounded by these texts, or more accurately, by what people have done with them. And if that's a part of your story, I don't think you're wrong to be cautious. But also, I don't want to surrender these stories, especially now when they're being mobilized to support a narrative that's so deeply harmful. As Unitarian Universalists, we claim wisdom from Jewish and Christian traditions as one of our living sources. And we don't have to approach those uncritically. We get to wrestle with them, argue about them, question them, doubt them. We don't have to ask, what must I believe? We can ask, what truth might still be waiting here? How can I read this differently? So all of that being said, there's one story in the Gospel of Luke that I keep returning to when I think about neighbors and welcome. And many of us are familiar with it. We heard it in Sunday school if we went. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And familiarity has softened it considerably. Good Samaritan is an ordinary phrase now. Hospitals are named after Samaritans. We have Good Samaritan laws, but that's not how the original listeners would have heard it. So, as we know, the story begins with a lawyer asking, "Who is my neighbor?" It sounds like a question about compassion, but there's another question underneath it. It's, where does my responsibility end? Give me the boundary. Tell me who's inside the circle and who's outside of it. And this lawyer wants a definition and gets a story instead. A man's traveling down a dangerous road. He's attacked, robbed, beaten, and left beside this road. A priest comes along, sees him, and passes by. Another religious figure comes along, sees him, and passes by. And then there comes the Samaritan. And here we lose the provocation because we already know the title of the story. Of course, the Samaritan is good. That's practically his name now. But for the original Jewish audience listening to this story, it carried generations of religious conflict and mutual suspicion. The Samaritan is precisely the person many of those listeners would have been prepared to distrust, prepared to be seen as other. And as we know, this outsider, this distrusted, this suspected one, stops, crosses the road, kneels beside this wounded person, bandages the wounds, and pays for the care. And I think we've made the story safer than it was in the Gospels. We tell it as though the lesson is, be nice to outsiders, help people who are different from you. And that's not a bad lesson, it's not. But look again at who's actually doing the helping. And beyond that, the Samaritan isn't waiting for anyone to recognize their humanity. They're already practicing the thing everyone else is discussing, while the people presumed to occupy the religious center walk past. And then, and I love this part, the lawyer's question gets flipped around, which is very lawyerly, right? The lawyer asks, "Who is my neighbor?" but isn't handed a category of people he's required to love. Instead asked, which of the three was a neighbor to the wounded person? And do you hear that difference? The lawyer wants a map of the obligations, and instead is asked what kind of human he wants to become. And so suddenly the person standing outside the accepted boundary isn't an object of compassion, they're the teacher. And so I wonder what changes when we carry that reading into how we encounter communities different from our own. What if our first question isn't always, how can we help? What if it sometimes is, what's already happening here? What can't I see? What have people already built out of necessity that we may have forgotten how to do ourselves? Where is somebody tending wounds beside the road? Are we willing to not just help, but to join them? And that takes a different kind of humility. It's hard. Charity can leave the giver unchanged. You can give someone food and go home, maybe exactly the same person, still believing the room fundamentally belongs to you. Belonging asks more. The newcomer simply doesn't learn our customs, we learn theirs. The person we thought needed our help may become the one who teaches us. Authority moves. The room itself changes. And I think we need that. I think religious communities need that. So every Sunday, people walk through doors carrying lives the rest of us can't see. Some carry grief, some carry addictions, some histories of incarceration, some have crossed national borders or other kinds of thresholds into lives they never expected to inhabit. Those experiences are not interchangeable, but every person who walks through that door brings more than need. They bring knowledge and memory, culture, survival, gifts, ways of seeing the world the rest of us may need. So I don't hope this becomes a congregation where anyone can walk in and simply hear there's room for you here. I hope we can say something harder, and that is, what can we become together? Because if you truly belong here, then your presence changes us, and mine does too, and that's riskier than welcome. But I think it's much closer to what community actually requires. And then back to the parable, there's the line that gives the sermon its title, go and do likewise. Not go and think likewise, not go and feel likewise, go and do likewise. There's going to be difficult questions ahead for us, not just about immigration and justice, but in general about our responsibilities to one another, about all sorts of things. And we won't always agree. And I hope that we're able to wrestle honestly. I hope that we resist believing that our job is to stand safely inside and decide whom we'll let in through the door. Sometimes our task is to cross the road. Sometimes it's to follow rather than lead. Sometimes it's to notice that the person we've been taught to call stranger, other, has been practicing the kind of community we've been trying to build all along. May we have the humility to recognize them. May we have the courage to cross over. And may we allow what we find there to change us over and over and over again. So go and do likewise. May it be so. May we be the ones who make it so. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. Thank you all. This morning, we do not extinguish this flame. Instead, we carry it with us from worship into the work of justice, from what we proclaim together into what we practice together. Today, we pass this light to our Immigrant Justice Action Group with the reminder that our faith doesn't end at the doors of our sanctuary. May this flame illuminate the work ahead and remind us that wherever we gather in the service of liberation, love, and human dignity, the sacred goes with us. Go from this place with open hearts and courageous love. Go knowing that you are loved. Blessed be.